Okay, so I bet you've heard about near-death experiences,
Yeah.
but have you ever wondered what they're like for kids?
It's a fascinating area.
We thought so too. So we did a deep dive into some recent research, and
Oh, yeah.
it's pretty wild, actually.
Really?
Yeah, we're talking about kids who report floating out of their bodies
Uh,
and journeys through spirals of light
wow.
and even visions of ancient cities.
That's incredible.
Well, we were looking at this case study series.
No.
It was published in the journal Explore.
Okay.
And they were making this point that kids' NDEs might be
Yeah.
less influenced by, like what they've heard about NDEs
Right.
or just cultural beliefs around death in general.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And that makes their experiences
Yeah.
potentially super valuable.
I see what you mean.
Like if their experiences are less filtered,
Uh-huh.
what can we learn from that?
Exactly. Yeah.
So one thing they found was that there were a lot of similarities with
Yeah.
what adults report, like out-of-body experiences.
Right.
And there were several kids in the study who described seeing themselves from outside of their bodies.
Interesting.
And one girl even said she was scared that she couldn't get back in.
Oh, wow.
And that separation from the physical body, that's
Yeah.
a common thing in NDE accounts.
Yeah, definitely.
And it just makes you think,
Yeah.
like, what is going on?
Really does.
Like, what is it that's leaving the body and having these experiences?
It's a big question.
Another thing that kept coming up
Oh, yeah.
was spirals and lights.
Mm.
There was this one boy, Harry,
Okay.
who drew these really detailed pictures
Oh, wow.
of going through these like spirals
Ah.
towards this super bright light.
Interesting. And this was a young kid.
Yeah, and then there was another boy, Jacob, and
Yeah.
he talked about being surrounded by this light,
Oh, wow.
even though his eyes were closed.
Huh. So it wasn't just, physical sight,
Great.
but something else.
It seems like time is also often distorted during NDEs.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So in the study,
Yeah.
a lot of the children describe time feeling different during their experiences, like it was speeding up or slowing down.
Like their consciousness was
Yeah.
operating
Right.
outside of our
Yeah.
normal perception of time.
It's like, what else is possible
Right.
if our consciousness isn't bound by those rules?
Exactly.
Did any of the kids report anything stranger than lights and spirals?
Well, that's where things take a really interesting turn.
Okay.
Remember Harry?
Yeah, the one who saw the spiral?
Yes. He also described being in this Roman-like city.
A Roman city?
Yeah. With these huge white columns everywhere.
So wait,
Yeah.
he saw a Roman city,
Yeah.
but that doesn't really sound like typical heaven imagery.
I know, right?
Maybe he'd seen a movie
Yeah.
about gladiators or something.
Here's the thing.
Okay.
Harry and his family had never even been to any Roman-style places.
Oh,
And he hadn't seen anything like it on TV or in books.
really?
And this is something that researchers actually call cities of light.
Cities of light.
Yeah, they're not super common,
Okay.
but they are definitely documented in NDE research.
So we're not just talking about tunnels and light,
Yep.
but maybe like experiencing other worlds or dimensions or
It's
something.
a possibility.
That's a lot to process.
It really is.
Okay, so we've talked about these full-blown NDEs,
Right.
but the study also mentioned something called bedside visions.
Yes.
What are those?
So these are a little different from like classic NDEs
Mm-hmm.
because they happen when someone is close to death,
Okay.
but not necessarily clinically dead.
Okay.
So think of it like a
Yeah.
liminal state between life and death.
Okay. I see.
And Harry, for instance, he said that he saw a girl in old-fashioned clothes who told him he had a bright future.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Did you recognize her?
No, he didn't.
Mm.
And that wasn't his only bedside vision.
Oh, really?
He talked about sensing other beings around his bed
Huh.
and even feeling like someone was pushing him,
Wow.
even though he was alone in the room.
I know some people might hear this and think,
Yeah.
well, maybe these kids were just on medication,
Right.
and that's what caused the visions.
Yeah, that's a common thought.
What do you say to that?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
And actually, the researchers addressed it directly.
Okay.
Some of the children were on medication,
Yeah.
but others weren't.
Hmm.
And they still reported similar experiences.
So it doesn't seem like that's the whole story.
Right. And plus, the researchers were very careful to consider any other factors that could have influenced the children's accounts.
Okay. So we were talking earlier about how
Yeah.
kids might have this more unfiltered view
Yeah.
of NDEs.
Right.
But how did these kids actually tell researchers about their experiences?
That's a great question.
Especially if they were,
Yeah.
too young to even really put it into words.
Right. Well, this is where the researchers took a really innovative approach.
Okay.
They actually used art and play therapy.
Hmm.
to help the kids express themselves,
Interesting.
especially the ones who struggle to find the words.
So instead of just asking them, like, what did you see?
Yeah.
They gave them, crayons and paint and
Exactly.
toys to communicate.
Uh-huh.
And they got much richer information that way.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
it makes you wonder if we gave adults those same tools,
Yeah.
would we learn even more about NDEs?
That's a really interesting thought.
It's like maybe we're limiting ourselves by
Yeah.
just relying on verbal descriptions.
Maybe. Yeah.
But if all these kids are describing similar things,
Right.
does that mean that culture doesn't matter at all?
Well, that's where things get a bit more nuanced.
Okay.
The study did find that cultural background might play some role in how these experiences are interpreted.
I see.
For example, Harry's family had strong beliefs in the supernatural,
Oh.
and that definitely shaped how they understood his experiences.
Hmm.
But even with those beliefs, Harry's Roman city and his bedside vision,
Right.
those were unique to him,
Yeah.
not directly from any cultural stories or beliefs.
So culture might provide a framework,
Right.
but the core experiences seem to go beyond those boundaries.
I think that's a great way to put it.
So does that mean that children are giving us
Yeah.
like a more accurate, less biased view of what an NDE is really like?
That's a question worth exploring further.
Yeah.
And it leads to a much bigger question that's
Right.
been debated for centuries.
Don't leave us hanging.
Okay, so if children's NDEs are less shaped by cultural narratives,
Uh-huh.
could that support the idea of a universal human experience of death?
Wow.
Is there some common thread that connects us all,
Mm,
regardless of our backgrounds or beliefs?
that's a big one.
It is. It's a question that people have been thinking about forever.
Yeah.
And this study doesn't give us all the answers, but it definitely adds to the
It
conversation.
makes you think.
Right.
Like, if kids' experiences are closer to that
Yeah.
raw, unfiltered NDE,
Yeah.
does that make them more believable?
That's an interesting question.
Or just harder to understand?
I think that's what's so cool about this kind of research.
Yeah.
It really makes you question everything you thought you knew.
Right.
It pushes us to look at consciousness in a new way.
Yeah.
And the limits of what we know from science.
I know, it's making me rethink
Yeah.
my whole concept of life and death.
I hear you.
But okay, with all these crazy findings, why
Why?
should we care?
Well, if you zoom out,
Yeah.
these kids' experiences give us a really unique look at what it means to be human.
Mm.
They show us that even when we're facing death,
Yeah.
there's still potential for meaning and connection.
It's like they're saying, hey,
Yeah.
there's so much more going on than you think.
It's kind of humbling.
Yeah, it's inspiring. And also maybe a little bit scary.
It's definitely a lot to take in.
So it seems like it's important to
Yeah.
really listen to kids, especially about stuff that's hard for us to understand
Right, like we might have lost touch with some of these insights
as we get older.
as we get older and more set in our ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I wonder if we're doing enough to help kids share these experiences
It's a good question.
without feeling like they're going to be judged.
Yeah, without feeling judged or dismissed.
Right.
It's about more than just validating their experiences.
Yeah.
It's about learning from them.
Mm.
These kids are really pushing the boundaries of how we think about consciousness
Mhm.
and death
Yeah.
and what's real.
We started by talking about how
Yeah,
children might offer this more genuine perspective on
wow.
NDEs.
less biased.
Yeah, less biased.
Uh-huh.
But the study mentions some limitations, right?
Well, yeah, of course. Every study has limitations.
Like they said it was a small group of kids. And mostly older ones.
Okay.
What about younger children
Yeah.
who might not even be able to describe what happened to them?
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
And the researchers acknowledge that we need more research,
Okay.
especially with younger children.
Mhm.
They even suggested that there might be this visual language.
Visual language.
Yeah, they call it visual semiosis.
Visual semiosis. Okay.
Yeah, it's this idea that
Mm.
very young children
Uh-huh.
might represent NDEs using symbols and images.
So like how
Yeah.
Harry drew the spirals.
Exactly, like that.
Could there be this whole visual vocabulary that we don't even know about?
I think it's definitely a possibility.
This deep dive has been a lot.
I know, right?
We've got kids floating out of their bodies,
Mm.
seeing spirals of light cities they've never been to,
It's pretty wild.
and these bedside visions.
It's like they're tapping into something that we've lost touch with.
It really does make you think,
Yeah.
if these experiences are universal,
Yeah.
what does that mean for us?
It's a question that's been debated for centuries.
What does it mean for our understanding of consciousness?
Exactly.
Is it just our brains?
Right.
Or is it something more?
Something beyond the physical.
I don't know.
It's exciting.
It is, but also kind of scary.
I know.
It makes you question everything.
And that's why this research with children is so important.
Yeah.
It challenges how we think about things and pushes the limits of what we know.
Right.
It forces us to approach these mysteries with curiosity and humility.
We've really only scratched the surface here.
We have, yeah.
But it's clear that there's so much more to learn.
Absolutely.
For those of you listening who want to keep learning,
Yes.
I highly recommend checking out the full research article.
Oh, yeah, it's a great read.
It's called Exploring Near-Death Experiences with Children Post-Intensive Care, a case series.
Okay.
And it's in the journal Explore.
And you can also find some really interesting books by PMH Atwater,
Yeah. She's done a lot of work on NDEs in children.
a pioneer in the field.
And remember, this is really just the beginning.
It is, yeah.
As more research is done, we'll continue to learn more about what these experiences are and what they can tell us.
Exactly. What they can tell us about the human mind and our place in the universe.
It feels like we're on the verge of a major shift in how we think about consciousness and the afterlife.
I think you might be right.
Who knows what we'll discover as we keep exploring this.
So much potential for new knowledge.
This deep dive has been definitely a lot to think about.
It really has.
But before we wrap up,
Yeah.
I want to leave you with this.
Okay, let's hear it.
What if these kids' experiences aren't just random events, but glimpses into a reality that we're all connected to?
Wow.
What if they're showing us that death isn't the end, but a transition?
A transition to something new.
That's a really powerful thought.
It really is.
It makes you wonder about the nature of consciousness.
It is.
Like, what if, even in the face of our greatest fears, there's this potential for something more?
There could be.
Yeah, for meaning and connection.
It's a beautiful thought.
Yeah, it's a thought that stays with you.
It really is.
And it makes you want to keep learning more.
Definitely. I think that's what drives us as humans.
Yeah.
This need to understand things.
To figure it all out.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe these kids' experiences, maybe they'll lead to a whole new way of looking at things.
Like, what do you mean?
Like one that combines science and spirituality.
That's interesting.
And helps us understand ourselves better and our place in the universe.
It's like they're showing us a path.
I like that, yeah.
To something new.
And encouraging us to think outside the box.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away?
That's a good question.
For all of this.
I think the most important thing is to be open-minded.
Open-minded.
Yeah, because these children's experiences,
Yeah.
they really challenge how we think about consciousness, what's real.
Yeah.
They show us that there's still so much we don't understand.
Definitely.
And that the universe is full of mysteries.
It's kind of humbling to
That's it.
realize how much we don't know.
Yeah. And it's also exciting
It is exciting.
because it means there's still so much to discover.
It's a good reminder that even the most amazing experiences can be found in unexpected places.
Yeah, like in the minds of children.
Exactly.
It's all about perspective.
So, to our listener out there,
Yes.
keep exploring
Keep asking questions.
and never lose that sense of wonder.
You never know what you might find.
Maybe you'll have your own deep dive into the mysteries of life and death.
That would be amazing.
Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.